The morning sun reflected off the massive windows of Orbital Station Terminus 7, casting long shadows across the training hall where 200 cadets stood at attention. Jiwoo Park kept her eyes forward, her shoulders squared, trying not to look as nervous as she felt. This was her third week at the Galactic Military Academy, and she still couldn't believe she was really here. The instructor entered the room, and Jiwoo had to remind herself not to stare. Velthron was 12 feet tall, covered in dark green scales with 4 muscular arms that moved with practiced precision. He was a Sarkah, one of the most respected warrior species in the galaxy. His yellow eyes swept across the assembled cadets before he began to speak. "Today we discuss the fundamental limits of combat," Velthron said, his voice deep and resonant. "Every species has strength. Every species has weaknesses. Understanding these limits keeps you alive." Jiwoo listened carefully as the instructor pulled up a holographic display. Images of various alien species appeared in the air, each demonstrating different combat techniques. There were 6-legged creatures that could run at incredible speeds, floating beings that could see in complete darkness, and armored giants that could lift small vehicles. For 10,000 years, we have studied warfare across 300 species, Velthron continued. We have learned absolute truths about combat capability. One such truth concerns ranged weapons. He paused, letting his words sink in. No species can effectively aim and fire 2 separate ranged weapons simultaneously at different targets. Several cadets shifted uncomfortably. Jiwoo felt her eyebrows rise slightly. Velthron noticed the reactions and smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I see some of you doubt this. Perhaps you think because I have 4 arms I can shoot 4 guns at once?" He picked up 2 training pistols from a nearby rack. "Watch carefully." The instructor held both weapons, one in each of his upper hands. 2 targets appeared at opposite ends of the range. Velthron fired both pistols, but Jiwoo noticed something interesting. His eyes focused on only one target at a time. When he shot at the left target, the right pistol fired in roughly the same direction but without precision. When he shifted his attention to the right target, the left pistol became inaccurate. "You see?" Velthron placed the weapons down. "My brain, like yours, like every brain we have studied, can only process one primary target at a time. My other arms provide stability, support, or suppressing fire. But true independent aiming? Impossible. The neural pathways required simply do not exist in any known species." Jiwoo raised her hand slowly. Velthron nodded at her. "Sir, has this been tested on humans?" she asked. "We've only been part of the Galactic Coalition for 5 years. "A fair question, Cadet Park," Velthron replied. "Yes, your species was tested during integration protocols. Humans show excellent hand-eye coordination and adaptation ability, but you possess the same limitation. Your brain architecture, while impressive in many ways, follows the same basic pattern as other species regarding target acquisition and tracking." The lesson continued, covering other combat limitations and tactical doctrines, but Jiwoo couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the instructor's conclusion. She had grown up on Earth in the Korean Peninsula territory, where her grandmother had taught her to shoot. Old-style revolvers, the kind that used physical bullets instead of energy charges. Her grandmother had been part of a historical preservation group that kept ancient combat skills alive. After class ended, Jiwoo headed to the cafeteria with her friend Taemin Cho. He was struggling with the academy's strict protocols, constantly getting demerits for small uniform violations. "That was fascinating," Taemin said, loading his tray with something that looked like blue noodles. "All those different species, all those different abilities. Makes you realize how much we still have to learn." "Do you really think it's impossible?" Jiwoo asked. "The dual-wielding thing?" Taemin shrugged. "Velthron has 40 years of experience. He's trained thousands of soldiers from hundreds of species. If he says it's impossible, I believe him. Why would he lie?" "Not lying," Jiwoo said carefully. "But maybe. Mistaken?" Her friend gave her a worried look. "Don't do anything stupid, Jiwoo. We're guests here. Earth is still proving itself to the Galactic Coalition. We need to follow their rules, respect their knowledge." But Jiwoo couldn't let it go. That evening, she made her way to the simulation range during free training hours. The facility was mostly empty, with only a few dedicated cadets practicing their marksmanship. She checked out 2 training pistols and entered a private booth. The simulation system allowed her to create custom scenarios. Jiwoo programmed 2 targets to appear simultaneously at different positions. She held one pistol in each hand, took a deep breath, and activated the program. The first few attempts were disasters. She fired both weapons, but only the shots from her right hand came close to hitting anything. Her left hand seemed to fire randomly, as Velthron had described. She tried again and again, adjusting her stance, her grip, her breathing. After an hour, something clicked. Jiwoo stopped trying to consciously aim both weapons and instead let her muscle memory take over. She had spent years shooting with her grandmother. Thousands of hours of practice. Her hands knew what to do. She just needed to trust them. She activated the simulation again. 2 targets appeared, one to her left and one to her right. Jiwoo raised both pistols and fired. Both targets registered hits. She blinked in surprise, then tried again. And again. After 20 attempts, she was hitting both targets consistently. "What are you doing?" Jiwoo spun around to find Taemin standing in the doorway of her booth, his eyes wide. "Just practicing," she said, lowering the weapons. "Jiwoo, that's not practicing. That's—" He struggled for words. "That's supposed to be impossible." She demonstrated for him again, hitting dual targets with both pistols. Taemin watched in silence, his expression shifting from disbelief to concern. "You need to stop," he said finally. "If the instructors find out you're trying to disprove their doctrine, you could get expelled. Earth can't afford that kind of controversy right now." "Or," Jiwoo said quietly, "maybe humans can do something no other species can do. Maybe that's worth showing them." Taemin ran a hand through his hair, clearly torn. "If you're wrong, you'll look like a fool. If you're right, you'll make the instructors look like fools. Either way, it's dangerous." Jiwoo holstered the training pistols and looked at her friend. "I need to know for sure. Will you help me?" He sighed deeply. "This is a terrible idea. But yes, I'll help you. Someone needs to keep you from getting kicked out of the academy." That night, Jiwoo lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling of her quarters. Tomorrow she would request a formal demonstration before the instructor cadre. She would prove that humans could do the impossible, or she would fail spectacularly in front of everyone who mattered. Either way, there was no turning back now. Outside her window, Earth hung in the darkness of space, a blue and white marble that seemed impossibly far away. Jiwoo thought of her grandmother, who had taught her that some skills were worth preserving even when the world said they were obsolete. Maybe this was one of those moments where the old ways would prove their value once more. The main training arena was packed with more bodies than Jiwoo had ever seen in one place on the station. 300 cadets from dozens of different species filled the observation gallery, their voices creating a buzz of anticipation that made her stomach twist with nerves. Word had spread quickly about the human cadet who claimed she could do the impossible. Jiwoo stood in the center of the arena floor, feeling very small. Above her, the massive form of General Cross occupied the command observation deck. The Chiric's general looked like a praying mantis that had been crossed with a tank, his chitinous armor gleaming under the bright lights. His compound eyes reflected no emotion as he gazed down at her. "Cadet Park," General Cross's voice boomed through the arena speakers. "You have requested this demonstration. You understand that making false claims about military capabilities is a serious offense?" "Yes, sir," Jiwoo replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I understand." Velthron stood nearby, his forearms crossed over his chest. He looked disappointed rather than angry, which somehow felt worse. "Jiwoo, it is not too late to withdraw this request. No one will think less of you for accepting established doctrine. With respect, sir, I need to try." A woman in a white coat approached them. Dr. Subin Yoon was one of the few human scientists working at the academy, specializing in comparative neurology. She carried a handheld scanner and gave Jiwoo a small, encouraging smile. "Before we begin," General Cross announced, "Dr. Yoon will conduct a medical scan to verify that Cadet Park has no cybernetic enhancements or genetic modifications that would invalidate this test." The doctor ran her scanner over Jiwoo's head and hands, the device beeping softly. "Scan complete," Dr. Yoon called out. "Cadet Park is completely baseline human. No enhancements detected. Very well," the general said. "Instructor Velthron, you may begin." Velthron activated the arena's holographic system. 8 target drones materialized in the air, 4 on each side of the arena. They began to move in random patterns, floating at various distances and heights. Standard military qualification requires hitting 6 of 8 targets within 45 seconds, Velthron explained to the crowd. For this demonstration, Cadet Park must hit all 8 targets within 30 seconds using her proposed dual-wielding method. The challenge will activate targets randomly on both sides simultaneously, requiring her to track and engage separate threats with each weapon. Jiwoo heard murmurs from the gallery. Someone laughed. The odds were heavily stacked against her, and everyone knew it. She saw Taemin in the crowd, his face tight with worry. Next to him stood Boranam, the top-ranked human cadet, watching with crossed arms and obvious skepticism. "You may use your personal weapons," Velthron said quietly, gesturing to a table where her 2 revolvers waited. They were old-fashioned firearms that her grandmother had given her before she left Earth. Polished steel with wooden grips. They looked primitive compared to the sleek energy weapons the other cadets carried. Jiwoo picked up both revolvers, feeling their familiar weight in her hands. She checked the ammunition cylinders by habit, then moved to the starting position. Around the arena, she saw aliens of every description watching her. Some looked curious, others skeptical, a few openly amused. "Ready?" she said. "Begin," General Cross commanded. The first 2 targets appeared instantly, one to her far left, one to her far right. Jiwoo raised both revolvers and fired. The sharp crack of gunpowder echoed through the arena as both targets exploded. 2 more appeared closer together. She fired again, both hands moving independently. 4 targets down in 3 seconds. The next pair appeared at different heights, one near the ceiling, one near the floor. Jiwoo tracked them with separate focus, her left eye on one target while her right eye tracked the other. Both weapons fired. Both targets shattered. The gallery had gone silent. The final 2 targets materialized, moving in opposite directions. Jiwoo turned her body slightly, each arm extending toward its target. She fired both revolvers simultaneously. The last targets exploded into digital fragments. "Time." Velthron's voice was barely above a whisper. 18 seconds. All targets eliminated. The arena remained silent for a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Cadets were shouting, some cheering, others arguing. The insectoid general raised one of his blade-like arms for silence, and the crowd gradually quieted. "Impossible," General Cross said flatly. "There must be an error with the simulation system." "The system is functioning perfectly, sir," a technician called out. Boranam stood up in the gallery. "Request permission to speak, sir." "Granted," the general replied. "Perhaps Cadet Park simply got lucky," Bora said. Her tone wasn't mean, just analytical. "One successful test doesn't prove anything. Anyone can have one good run." "A valid point," General Cross agreed. "Cadet Park, are you willing to repeat the test?" Jiwoo reloaded her revolvers. "Yes, sir." She ran the test again. 19 seconds, all targets hit. Then a third time. 17 seconds. By the 4th run, even the skeptics in the crowd had fallen silent. Jiwoo wasn't getting lucky. She was consistently doing something that 10,000 years of galactic military science said was impossible. General Cross descended from his observation deck, his massive form moving with surprising grace. He approached Jiwoo, studying her with his compound eyes. "Explain how you do this," he demanded. "I don't know exactly, sir," Jiwoo admitted. "When I shoot, I'm not thinking about aiming each gun separately. It's more like my hands know where to point and my eyes just confirm the targets are there. My grandmother taught me to shoot when I was young. We practiced for years with these revolvers." "Muscle memory," Dr. Yoon said, stepping forward. "General, if I may?" Cross gestured for her to continue. The doctor pulled up a holographic display of a human brain. "Human neural architecture has some unique features. Our cerebral hemispheres have a high degree of independence compared to most species. Each hemisphere can process visual information and control fine motor movements separately. It's why humans are unusually good at multitasking and why we developed complex bilateral coordination." "Many species have bilateral brains," Velthron objected. "Why can only humans do this?" "It's not just the bilateral structure," Dr. Yoon explained. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tool users. We needed extremely precise hand-eye coordination to throw spears, napstone tools, and manipulate objects with both hands independently. Over millions of years, our brains developed pathways that other species don't have. Most species in the galaxy evolved with claws, natural weapons, or different hunting strategies. They didn't need the same level of independent bilateral fine motor control." General Cross turned back to Jiwoo. "If what you demonstrate is real, why did our integration tests not discover this capability?" Jiwoo thought carefully before answering. "Sir, the tests probably used standard military pistols that the test subjects had never trained with before. I've been shooting these specific revolvers since I was 10 years old. It takes thousands of hours of practice. It's not just about having the right brain structure. You need the training to develop the skill. Velthron approached the table where Jiwoo's revolvers lay. He picked one up carefully, examining it with professional interest. These are ballistic weapons, projectile-based chemical propellant. Very primitive technology. Yes, sir, Jiwoo agreed. And yet you show greater combat effectiveness with these primitive weapons than most cadets achieve with modern energy pistols. The instructor set the revolver down gently. I have trained soldiers for 40 years. I have studied combat doctrine from 300 species. I was certain I knew the limits of what was possible. He looked at Jiwoo with something like respect. I was wrong. General Cross's antennae twitched with what might have been irritation or thought. This changes nothing. A circus trick is not battlefield tactics. Dual wielding may work in a controlled environment, but combat is chaos. You would be just as likely to shoot your own squad members as the enemy. Then let me prove it in training exercises, Jiwoo said before she could stop herself. Real combat simulations with actual squad tactics. The general's eyes seemed to narrow, though it was hard to tell with compound vision. You would stake your military career on this demonstration? Jiwoo thought of her grandmother, of the countless hours spent on the practice range, of Taemin's worried face in the crowd. She thought of Earth still trying to prove its worth to the galaxy. Yes, sir, I would. General Cross was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Very well. You will be assigned to combat training operations. We will see if your skill has any practical application. But understand this, Cadet Park. If you demonstrate that this technique is dangerous or ineffective, dual wielding will be permanently banned for all humans in coalition forces. I understand, sir. As the arena emptied, Boranam approached Jiwoo. The top cadet extended her hand. That was impressive. I apologize for suggesting you were just lucky. Jiwoo shook her hand. You were right to be skeptical. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. Perhaps you could teach me sometime, Bora said with a slight smile. If we humans have this ability, we should develop it properly. After everyone had left, Jiwoo found herself alone in the arena with Velthron. The massive instructor looked at her with his yellow eyes, his expression unreadable. 3 months after her demonstration, Jiwoo found herself crouched behind a collapsed concrete wall on a planet called Hesper 4, listening to the sounds of actual warfare. The simulation ranges at the academy had been loud, but they hadn't prepared her for the earth-shaking thunder of artillery or the high-pitched scream of plasma weapons cutting through the air above her head. Contact left. 300 meters. Someone shouted over the squad communication channel. Jiwoo peered around the edge of her cover. The city of Ironfall had been a mining town before the war started, home to 40,000 workers from a dozen different species. Now it was a maze of ruined buildings and debris-filled streets where coalition forces fought against the Sovereignty Union's separatist army. Her squad consisted of 8 soldiers from various species, led by Captain Wu Jin Kang, a human special operations commander who had specifically requested her after hearing about the academy demonstration. The captain was currently conferring with their team's scout, a Klindari sergeant named Daxril who looked like a 7-foot-tall praying mantis with armor plating. The target building is 2 blocks north, Captain Kang said, marking a position on everyone's helmet display. Intelligence asset is trapped on the 3rd floor. Sovereignty forces have the entire block surrounded. Estimated 40 to 50 hostiles between us and extraction. Jiwoo checked her revolvers for the 100th time that day. She had graduated from the academy with commendations in marksmanship and tactics, but this was her first real combat deployment. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Lieutenant Bayek reports enemy air support is suppressed, the captain continued. We have a 20-minute window before their reinforcements arrive. Standard extraction protocol. Move fast, hit hard, get our asset, and get out. Questions? Sir, Jiwoo said. What's the protocol if I encounter multiple targets simultaneously? Captain Kang gave her a knowing look. Official protocol says you engage targets one at a time like every other soldier. Unofficially, I requested you for this mission because standard tactics aren't working in this urban environment. Use your judgment, Corporal. Sergeant Daxril turned his triangular head toward Jiwoo. His species had evolved as ambush hunters, and his compound eyes could track movement most species would miss. I saw the recording of your demonstration, he said in his clicking, translated voice. Very efficient killing. I approve. The squad moved out using the ruins for cover as they advanced toward the target building. Jiwoo stayed in the middle of the formation, her role designated as flexible response. Since command still hadn't figured out where a dual-wielding specialist fit in standard tactics, they made it one block before the first contact. 3 sovereignty soldiers appeared from a side street, carrying heavy plasma rifles. The lead element of Jiwoo's squad engaged immediately, but 2 more enemies appeared from a second-floor window, catching them in a crossfire. Jiwoo saw it happen in slow motion. Her squad mates could only focus on the ground-level threats, turning their backs to the window. The enemies above were lining up shots that would cut through armor like paper. She raised both revolvers and fired. Her right hand tracked the first window target while her left hand found the second. Both enemies dropped before they could pull their triggers. The ground-level threats fell to her squad mates' return fire a moment later. "Nice shooting, Corporal," Captain Kang said. "Keep moving." They advanced another half-block before running into serious resistance. Sovereignty forces had fortified an intersection with portable barriers and heavy weapons. Daxril's scanner showed 8 enemies in defensive positions with overlapping fields of fire. "Standard assault would cost us 3 casualties minimum," the captain muttered. "We don't have time for a flanking maneuver." "I can suppress multiple positions simultaneously," Jiwoo offered. Captain Kang studied the tactical display, then looked at her. "If you miss, you're in the open with no cover." "I won't miss, sir," he nodded slowly. "Daxril, take position to provide covering fire. Everyone else, when Jiwoo moves, we advance on her signal. Corporal Park, you're authorized to engage using whatever method you judge most effective." Jiwoo felt her training take over as she moved to the edge of cover. She could see 4 enemy positions from her angle. 2 more were visible in her peripheral vision. In the academy, instructors had taught her to prioritize targets, engage them sequentially, maintain cover discipline. But those instructors had never seen urban combat like this. She burst from cover in a dead run, both revolvers coming up as she moved. Her right eye tracked the leftmost enemy position while her left eye found the rightmost. She fired both weapons while still in motion. 2 enemies went down. Her hands shifted to the next targets without conscious thought, firing again. 2 more dropped. By the time the remaining enemies realized what was happening, her squad was advancing behind her, adding their fire to hers. The intersection was clear in 15 seconds. 0 friendly casualties by the ancestors, Daxril clicked. That was the most efficient assault I have witnessed in 30 years of combat. They reached the target building without further resistance, but that was when everything went wrong. The intelligence asset was supposed to be alone on the 3rd floor, but sovereignty forces had somehow learned about the extraction. The squad walked into an ambush. Plasma fire erupted from 3 different rooms simultaneously as they entered the building. The front of the squad went down immediately. Captain Kang took a glancing hit that seared through his shoulder armor. Daxril dragged him back behind a concrete pillar while Jiwoo and the remaining 4 soldiers found whatever cover they could. "We're pinned," someone shouted. "Multiple shooters, can't get a clear angle on any of them." Jiwoo assessed the situation with the cold clarity that came from thousands of hours of training. They were trapped in a central hallway with enemy fire coming from doorways on the left, right, and straight ahead. Standard tactics said they should retreat, call for backup, and let artillery level the building. But the intelligence asset would die, and the captain was bleeding. "Cover me," Jiwoo said. Before anyone could argue, she was moving. She sprinted down the hallway, both revolvers extended. Her right hand tracked the doorway ahead while her left hand swept the rooms to her side. She fired both weapons in a continuous rhythm, not stopping to aim in the traditional sense but letting her hands point where her divided attention directed them. The enemy in the forward room dropped. Jiwoo pivoted, her body turning right while her left hand continued to cover the other direction. She fired twice more. Another enemy fell. A plasma bolt passed so close to her head that she smelled burning hair. But she didn't stop moving. She hit the first room on the left, kicked the door fully open, and found 3 sovereignty soldiers trying to reposition. They turned toward her in surprise, clearly not expecting anyone to successfully advance through their crossfire. Jiwoo shot the first one with her right hand while her left hand was already tracking the second. Both fell. The third raised his hands in surrender. "Clear left," she called out. The squad advanced, clearing the remaining rooms with Jiwoo's covering fire. They found the intelligence asset, a Prexan scientist named Dr. Talvin hiding in a sealed closet. The extraction took 4 more minutes. Then they were running through the streets with Lieutenant Bayek's transport ship screaming in for pickup. They made it back to base with the asset alive and only 2 casualties, both non-life-threatening. Captain Kang was in medical getting his shoulder regenerated when General Cross's face appeared on every screen in the base. Corporal Jiwoo Park, report to command immediately. Jiwoo's stomach dropped. She had used unauthorized combat techniques in direct violation of regulations. Court-martial seemed inevitable. The command center was crowded with senior officers from multiple species. General Cross stood at the center, his compound eyes reflecting the tactical displays around him. Velthran was there too, his massive form unmistakable even in the crowd. Corporal Park, the general began, your actions today violated standing weapons protocols. You engaged multiple targets simultaneously using unapproved techniques. You advanced through hostile fire using methods that no training manual supports. Do you deny these charges? No, sir. I don't deny them. Your recklessness could have cost lives. Your disregard for proper procedure undermines military discipline. General Cross paused, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his alien features. It also saved lives and completed a mission that standard tactics would have failed. Jiwoo blinked in surprise. Velthran stepped forward. I reviewed the combat footage personally. What Corporal Park demonstrated today was not luck or recklessness. It was a legitimate tactical capability that we have failed to recognize. I was wrong to dismiss dual-wielding as impractical. My pride in my own experience blinded me to new possibilities. Captain Kang entered the command center, his shoulder freshly healed. Sirs, I specifically requested Corporal Park because I knew standard doctrine was inadequate for urban warfare against numerically superior forces. She performed exactly as I hoped she would. Sergeant Daxrel was there too, standing in the back. The Klindari clicked his mandibles in what Jiwoo had learned was his species' version of laughter. Watching her fight was beautiful. The training facility on Unity Prime was still under construction when Jiwoo arrived. Fabrication drones swarmed over the half-finished buildings like mechanical insects, their work lights creating strange shadows in the perpetual twilight of the capital station's outer ring. She stood at the entrance, watching construction crews from 4 different species coordinate their efforts, and wondered if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. Impressive, isn't it? Colonel Ji-Eun Kwan walked up beside her, carrying a datapad and wearing the calm expression of someone who had seen enough military bureaucracy to never be surprised by anything. They built this facility in 3 weeks. That's how seriously High Command is taking your program. Jiwoo turned to face her new commanding officer. Colonel Kwan was in her 50s, a career training specialist who had volunteered to oversee the experimental dual-wielding program. She had sharp eyes that seemed to evaluate everything and everyone with professional detachment. I'm not sure I'm qualified to run something this important, ma'am, Jiwoo admitted. Neither am I, the colonel replied with brutal honesty, but you're the only human who has demonstrated the capability in actual combat. And I'm the only training officer willing to stake her reputation on an untested doctrine. So we'll figure it out together or fail spectacularly trying. She handed Jiwoo the datapad. These are your candidates. 50 volunteers from various military branches, all human, all previously tested as having above-average bilateral coordination. Not all of them will make it through training. Jiwoo scrolled through the files. She recognized some names. Boranam was on the list, as was Taemin Cho. Her friend had barely qualified as a basic rifleman at the academy, but he had volunteered anyway. Others were combat veterans from the Hesper 4 campaign, soldiers who had seen what dual-wielding could do and wanted to learn. When do we start? Jiwoo asked. Tomorrow morning. Your first class begins at 0600. And Corporal? The colonel's expression softened slightly. Don't try to teach them to be you. Teach them to find their own version of the skill. Everyone's brain works a little differently. The first day was a disaster. Jiwoo had 50 eager volunteers assembled in the new training range, all carrying dual pistols, all convinced they could master the technique quickly. She ran them through basic targeting drills, asking them to engage 2 separate targets simultaneously. 42 of them couldn't do it at all. Their shots went wild. Their hands seemed to fight each other for attention, and several nearly injured themselves with poor trigger discipline. Of the remaining 8, only 3 showed anything resembling natural ability. Boranam was one of them, Taman was not. "This is impossible," one frustrated volunteer said, slamming his pistols down on the range table. "My hands won't do what my brain tells them." "Then your brain is telling them wrong," Jiwoo replied, trying to remember how Velthron had taught at the academy. "You're trying to consciously control both hands. You need to trust your muscle memory instead." "I don't have muscle memory for this," the soldier protested. "None of us do." He was right, and that was the problem. Jiwoo had learned to shoot with her grandmother over many years, building skills gradually without even realizing how unusual they were. These soldiers needed to develop in months what had taken her a lifetime. Admiral Hyunwoo Song visited the facility at the end of the first week. He was Earth's highest-ranking officer in coalition forces, a political strategist as much as a military commander. He watched the training in silence for an hour before speaking. "How many qualifiers do you expect, Corporal?" he asked. Jiwoo hesitated. "Honestly, sir, I don't know. Maybe 10, maybe less. High Command wants at least 30. They want to deploy a full combat unit. I can't create ability where it doesn't exist, sir." The Admiral nodded slowly. "No, but you can train the ability that does exist. Focus on your naturals first. Get them to expert level, then we'll worry about expanding the program." He paused. "For what it's worth, you're doing something unprecedented. Creating a new combat doctrine from scratch is never easy." By the end of the first month, Jiwoo had identified 17 candidates with genuine potential. She restructured the program, creating an intensive track for these naturals while maintaining basic training for the others in case they developed the skill later. Boranam progressed rapidly. She approached dual-wielding like a mathematical problem, calculating angles and timing with precision that bordered on mechanical. Within 6 weeks, she was hitting dual targets with 90% accuracy. Taman struggled. His hands worked independently well enough, but his accuracy was inconsistent. Jiwoo found him in the range late one night practicing alone, his face tight with frustration. "I'm going to wash out," he said when he noticed her. "I can feel it. I'm just not good enough." Jiwoo sat down on the bench next to him. "Do you remember at the academy when you told me trying to disprove doctrine was a terrible idea?" "I remember. I was right too. Look at the pressure you're under now." "But you helped me anyway," Jiwoo said. "You helped me practice even though you thought I'd fail. That's worth more than natural talent." She spent the next 2 hours working with him, adjusting his stance, his grip, his breathing. They discovered that Taemin was trying too hard to aim. When he trusted his instincts and fired faster, his accuracy improved dramatically. "Stop thinking so much," Jiwoo told him. "Your conscious mind is too slow. Let your subconscious do the work." Taemin tried again, firing both pistols in rapid succession. Both targets registered hits. He stared at the results in surprise. "I did it. I actually did it." "You always could," Jiwoo said. "You just needed to believe it." The program attracted attention from across the coalition. Alien officers visited to observe training. Scientists came to study the human candidates. And political observers wondered what this capability meant for Earth's role in galactic military affairs. Dr. Subin Yoon returned to conduct neurological studies on the successful candidates. She brought equipment that mapped brain activity in real time, showing the neural pathways that activated during dual-wielding exercises. "Fascinating," the doctor said, studying Boranam's brain scan. "Your bilateral hemisphere coordination is off the charts. Each side of your brain is processing completely independent visual and motor information. It's like watching two people working in perfect cooperation inside one skull." She compared the scans of successful candidates against those who had washed out. The differences were subtle but measurable. Successful dual-wielders showed stronger connections between their visual cortex and motor control centers, along with unusual symmetry in their hemisphere development. "Can this be trained?" Colonel Kwan asked. "To some degree," Dr. Yoon replied, "but it requires a specific baseline ability that not everyone has. Approximately 30% of humans show the neural architecture for dual-wielding, but only with extensive training does it become combat effective. By month 4, the program had 17 qualified candidates. By month 5, that number had dropped to 15 as 2 soldiers couldn't maintain the required accuracy under stress. But the remaining 15 were exceptional. They could engage multiple targets in complex environments with accuracy that matched or exceeded single-weapon specialists. Jiwoo developed training scenarios that pushed them harder each week. They practiced in low light and smoke-filled rooms while moving at full sprint, while under simulated fire. The scenarios became more complex, requiring them to make split-second decisions about target priority, while managing two weapons simultaneously. Boranam suggested they develop hand signals for dual-wielder tactics. If they were going to be deployed as a unit, they needed a way to coordinate their unique capabilities. "We're not just shooters," she explained during a planning session. "We're force multipliers. One of us can cover angles that would normally require two soldiers. We need tactics that exploit that advantage." The team developed what they called spread coverage tactics, where normal soldiers would stack together to clear a room. Dual wielders could split their attention, covering multiple approaches simultaneously. They could suppress multiple positions during an advance, maintain 360-degree security with fewer personnel, and engage threats that would normally require coordinated fire from multiple shooters. Admiral Song reviewed their progress at the 6-month mark. The 15 qualified dual wielders demonstrated their capabilities in a complex urban warfare simulation that would normally require a squad of 30 soldiers. They completed the scenario with higher success rates and fewer casualties than any conventional unit. "Impressive," the Admiral said. "What do you call yourselves?" Jiwoo and Bora exchanged glances. They had discussed this. "Gemini Squad, sir," Jiwoo replied. "After the constellation. 2 stars working as one. Gemini Squad," the Admiral repeated, testing the name. "I like it. You deploy to Hesper 4 next month. The border war is escalating, and Coalition Command wants to evaluate your combat effectiveness in a real battlefield environment." That evening, Jiwoo gathered Gemini Squad in the completed training facility. 17 soldiers, including herself and 2 alternates who had recently qualified. They came from different backgrounds, different regions of Earth, different military branches, but they shared something unique 6 months ago, most people. The war room on Hesper 4 smelled like ozone and recycled air. Jiwoo stood with the rest of Gemini Squad, studying the holographic display that showed 10,000 enemy troops advancing on the capital city of Ironfall. Coalition defenders numbered only 3,000, and everyone in the room knew what those numbers meant. "They'll hit us in 3 waves, Velthron said, his forearms pointing at different sections of the map. "First wave will probe our defenses. Second wave will exploit any weaknesses. Third wave will be the main assault intended to break through our lines completely." General Cross stood at the center of the command table, his compound eyes reflecting the red enemy markers that seemed to outnumber friendly forces, 5 to 1. "We have prepared defensive positions throughout the city. Heavy weapons emplacements here, here, and here. Standard infantry squads will hold these key intersections." "Where do you want Gemini Squad?" Jiwoo asked. The general's antennae twitched. "You will be mobile reserve. When a sector is in danger of collapse, you deploy to stabilize it. Your dual-wielding capability should be most effective in close-quarters urban combat where the enemy tries to overwhelm positions with numbers." Boranam studied the map with her characteristic analytical focus. "We're 17 operators. You're asking us to potentially plug gaps in multiple locations against forces that could number in the hundreds per sector." "Yes," General Cross said bluntly. "That is exactly what I am asking. If your capability has real military value, now is the time to prove it." The first wave hit at dawn. Jiwoo watched from a rooftop observation post as sovereignty forces poured into the eastern sector, like a flood of steel and plasma fire. Coalition defenses held initially, but the sheer weight of enemy numbers began to tell. Within an hour, 3 defensive positions were reporting critical ammunition shortages and mounting casualties. "Gemini Squad, deploy to Sector 7. Velthran's voice crackled over the tactical network. "The line is breaking." They moved through the ruined city in their custom formation, a loose diamond that allowed each dual-wielder maximum freedom of movement. Jiwoo had spent 6 months training them to trust each other's ability to cover multiple angles simultaneously. Now they would see if that training held under real combat pressure. Sector 7 was chaos. A coalition squad of 12 soldiers had been reduced to 4, pinned behind a collapsed building with enemy forces advancing from 3 directions. The survivors were trying to retreat, but sovereignty soldiers had cut off their escape route. "Spread formation," Jiwoo ordered. "Taemin Youngsu take the left approach. Boramir and Donghyun clear the right. Everyone else center push with me." Gemini Squad hit the enemy position like a surgical strike. Jiwoo burst around the corner with both revolvers extended. her right hand tracking enemies on the left side of the street while her left hand found targets on the right. She fired continuously, each hand operating independently. Behind her, Taemin and Youngsu provided similar coverage, creating overlapping fields of fire that caught the enemy completely off guard. The sovereignty forces were trained to fight against conventional soldiers who could only aim one weapon at a time. They used standard flanking tactics, trying to force defenders to choose which threat to address first. Against Gemini Squad, those tactics became lethal mistakes. The dual-wielders engaged multiple threats simultaneously, eliminating enemies faster than they could react. Sector 7 was clear in 4 minutes. 4 coalition soldiers saved, 28 enemy casualties. 0 friendly losses. Gemini Squad deployed to Sector 12, Infantry Squad taking heavy casualties. They ran through the streets, engaging enemy patrols as they went. Each encounter reinforced what Jiwoo had suspected during training. In urban warfare, where threats came from multiple directions, dual-wielding provided a massive advantage. They could clear rooms that would normally require full squads, hold positions that should have been indefensible, and advance through fire zones that would stop conventional soldiers cold. By noon, Gemini Squad had deployed to 7 different crisis points, stabilizing the line at each location. But they were exhausting themselves, burning through ammunition at an incredible rate, and the enemy kept coming. Second wave inbound, Velthran reported. 8,000 troops fresh and organized. They know where our weak points are now. The second wave was smarter and better coordinated. Sovereignty commanders had noticed the small units of dual-wielding humans and started adapting their tactics. They began using suppressing fire to limit mobility, forcing Gemini Squad to take cover and reducing the effectiveness of their split attention. Jiwoo took a plasma bolt to her armor that knocked her flat. Taemin dragged her behind cover while Bora and the others maintained covering fire with both weapons. "You okay?" Taemin shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "Armor held," Jiwoo gasped, checking herself for serious injuries. "Keep fighting." They held Sector 19 against a force of over 100 enemies for 20 minutes, buying time for reinforcements to arrive. By the time relief forces reached them, Gemini Squad had suffered its first casualties. Youngsu was down with a leg wound. Miran had taken shrapnel to her shoulder, but they had stopped a breakthrough that could have collapsed the entire eastern defense line. Third wave in 30 minutes, General Cross announced. This is their main assault. Every available soldier to defensive positions. Gemini Squad, return to command post for resupply and briefing. Jiwoo gathered her team in a partially collapsed building that served as their temporary base. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination. Youngsu was being evacuated for medical treatment. Miran refused to leave despite her injury. "We've been fighting for 8 hours, Donghyun said, his voice rough. "How much longer can we keep this up?" "As long as we have to," Bora replied, reloading her weapons with mechanical precision. "This is what we trained for." A massive explosion shook the building. Through the broken windows, Jiwoo could see the enemy's third wave advancing. Not 8,000 troops, closer to 10,000. Sovereignty forces had committed everything to this assault. "They're pushing hardest on the eastern sector." Velthran's voice came over the command channel. He sounded tired for the first time since Jiwoo had met him. "My division is holding the main defensive line, but we're about to be overrun. Gemini Squad, I need you at my position. Now." They ran through streets filled with debris and smoke, guided by their helmet navigation systems. The eastern sector was a nightmare of urban warfare. Buildings burned, artillery rounds screamed overhead, and the sounds of thousands of soldiers fighting echoed off the concrete walls. Velthran's position was a 3-story building that overlooked a critical intersection. Coalition forces had turned it into a fortress, but enemy troops were swarming the ground floor, and the defenders on the upper levels were running out of ammunition. "The position is lost," Velthran said when Jiwoo reached him. The massive Sarkoth Instructor had plasma burns across 2 of his arms and a crack in his armor that leaked green blood. "We need to evacuate the wounded and fall back to secondary positions." "If you fall back, they break through to the city center," Jiwoo said. "The whole defense line collapses. I am aware, but staying means dying, and I will not waste lives on a position that cannot be held." Jiwoo looked at her squad. They were battered, exhausted, and outnumbered at least 50 to 1. They were also the most lethal close-quarters combat unit in the coalition military. "Give us 5 minutes," she said. Gemini Squad can hold the ground floor while you evacuate wounded and reposition your troops. 5 minutes. Belthran's yellow eyes studied her. There are over 200 enemy soldiers converging on this building. 5 minutes means dying slowly instead of quickly. Then we better make them count, sir. Belthran was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. 5 minutes. Then we fall back whether you survive or not. Gemini Squad moved down to the ground floor, which had become a maze of rubble and broken walls. Jiwoo positioned her people to maximize their dual-wielding advantage. Each operator covered multiple angles, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the entire ground floor into a kill zone. "They're coming," Bora reported, her voice calm despite the situation. Enemy soldiers poured into the building from 4 different entrances. They came in organized units using proper cover and fire discipline. They were professional soldiers who expected to overwhelm the defenders through superior numbers and firepower. What they got instead was Gemini Squad. Jiwoo opened fire with both revolvers, engaging targets to her left and right simultaneously. Beside her, Taemin did the same, his hands moving with the confidence born from 6 months of intensive training. Around the room, 14 other dual-wielders created a storm of accurate fire that caught the enemy completely off guard. The sovereignty soldiers tried to adapt. They threw grenades, used smoke for concealment, attempted flanking maneuvers. But every standard tactic failed against opponents who could track and engage multiple targets independently. Jiwoo lost track of time. She reloaded her revolvers 4 times, her hands performing the mechanical actions while her eyes never stopped searching for threats. An enemy soldier appeared in her peripheral vision. Her left hand shot him while her right hand was still engaged with a target on the opposite.